Hi, I'm Brother Jake. Now, there are a lot of people out there that think that the Book of Mormon is a 19th century piece of biblical fan fiction, but they couldn't be more wrong. Let me explain. But first, let's set the stage, shall we? Like I've talked about before, the Book of Mormon is a sacred book of scripture that was written by the ancient inhabitants of the Americas on these golden plate thingies and then buried for hundreds of years until the guy that buried them appeared as an angel to Joseph Smith in 1820 and told him where they were buried, which just so happened to be like right behind his house. And then Joseph Smith dug them up and translated them through the power of God by reading them off this special rock inside a hat, which I've also talked about before. So basically, the Book of Mormon is proof that Joseph Smith was a legit prophet, since if the Book of Mormon is true, that would mean that Joseph Smith was telling the truth about being shown golden plates by an angel, which would mean that he was really given divine power to translate them, which would mean that he was really called of God, which would mean that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that he restored is the one true Church of Christ. Got it? But here's the deal. There are a bunch of people that say that the Book of Mormon isn't exactly accurate or remotely plausible as a real actual history of real actual people that lived in the real actual ancient Americas, which would mean that Joseph Smith made the golden plates and the angel Moroni thing up, which would mean that he wasn't called as a prophet, which would mean that this isn't the one true Church of Christ. But don't worry, it's not a big deal at all. Now, a lot of these so-called issues with the Book of Mormon spring from the fact that the American continent apparently has always been a bit of a loner, geographically speaking, since it's, surrounded by a couple of big old oceans. But according to a bunch of scientists, back millions of years ago during the last ice age, sea levels all over the world dropped because all the water got kind of sucked up into the polar ice caps, which meant that for the first time in, forever, the Americas were directly connected to other continents by a little strip of land right... Oh, here. Anyway, that allowed some animals and the humans that hunted them to just kind of wander into America, I guess. Then when the Ice Age ended around 10 to 15,000 years ago, the polar ice caps melted, the sea levels came back up, which put that strip of land back underwater and kind of put the kibosh on plants and animals or cultural ideas going between Eurasia and the Americas until people figured out how to sail across those big old oceans and get some trade routes going in the 15th, 16th centuries. So this is where the idea of an anachronism comes in, which is a fancy word for when something that's supposedly from a certain time period in the past has things in it that are clearly from a future time period. Well, future compared to the original time period. They're both in the past compared to like now, which means that the thing is actually from a future but still past period and not from the past period at all. You know what? How about an example? Say, I don't know. One day in elementary school, your friend Kevin comes up and he's like, "Hey, I'll let you look at my great-grandpa's time capsule from the Civil War for $5. And then there's one of these in there. You should probably call him a dumb, stupid, booger-eating, doo-doo head stinky liar and ask for your lunch money back. Because having that in a box of Civil War memorabilia would be...
anachronistic.
That's right. Take that, Kevin. You freaking jerk. Anyway, the point is that all these fancy archaeologists are saying that some of the animals and plants mentioned in the Book of Mormon are anachronistic to the ancient Americas since they didn't, exist anywhere in the Americas before the European colonists showed up. Which might make it kind of seem like the Book of Mormon was actually written by someone in post-colonial America who was just making up a story about ancient Americans based off the stuff he kind of saw around him at the time, rather than being written by ancient Americans themselves. But you know what? I bet it's not that big a deal. I mean, how many of these so-called anachronistic plants and animals could there be? Let's see. There's horses and cows and sheep and goats and donkeys and swine and bees and elephants and wheat and barley and grapes. Okay, that's a list. But you know what? We'll take them one at a time and start with the horses. Okay, horses. Let's see. Horses. Okay. Looky here. Turns out there were horses in ancient America since archaeologists found pre-Columbian horse remains in Alaska, which they dated back to 8 to 10,000 years ago. Oh, that's a bit further back than the Book of Mormon, but no biggie. Okay, horses. Look, it obviously says horses in the Book of Mormon, but what if it's just like something that got, mixed up in the translation process? Like maybe the Nephites wrote the word for some other animal that existed in the Americas, like a deer or a tapir or something. I mean, don't hold me to the deer tapir thing exactly. I'm just spitballing. But when Joseph Smith was translating it, he just kind of inserted something he was more familiar with, i.e. horse. So when it says horse, it's not horse, it's horse. I mean, that kind of flies in the face of the translation process as we understand it, since according to the people that were there, Joseph Smith was reading the translation God was providing word for word off the rock in his hat, which doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for him to get, creative with the wording, but maybe Maybe the people who wrote the Book of Mormon did use the word horse to refer to something like a horse, like a deer or tapir. Again, not saying it was deer or tapir for sure, because that's the only thing that they were familiar with. Okay, all right. Forget the other thing I said. This is way better. It has a fancy academic name and everything. It's called loan shifting. It's when the meaning of an established word is adapted to apply it to more stuff. There are examples of this happening too in real life. For example, when the Romans first came across one of these things, they had no idea what to call it, so they named it after something that they were familiar with that was kind of similar: hippopotamus or water horse. So that's what the Nephites did. It's loan shifting. They obviously knew what horses were since they came from the Middle East, so they totally knew what horses were, okay? But when they saw things that they weren't familiar with here in the New World, again, not saying it's these things necessarily, they called those things horses because that was the next closest thing for them. But they didn't mean, horses. They were just using their point of reference. And yes, that may seem like a mix-up that only someone with impaired vision or something would make. And to be fair, even the Romans threw a modifier in there to make sure it didn't get mixed up with the real thing. But every culture has their own way of doing things, and the whole loan shifting thing already happened once with hippopotamus, so what are you going to do? Now, at this point, some of you might be saying, but swapping out the words doesn't solve the fundamental issue, which is that any society with domesticated beasts of burden leaves a wide swath of archaeological clues beyond just the animals themselves, like corrals and grazing lands and writing tools, as well as depictions of the animals in art and religious symbolism, and there's no indication whatsoever that any society utilizing domesticated beasts of burden of any kind existed anywhere in the Americas at all before the arrival of Columbus. But you know what? There are a lot of things that we haven't discovered yet. Yeah, horses really hit it big in America after the Europeans landed, but maybe the whole beasts of burden thing just didn't go mainstream back in Book of Mormon times. Maybe it's all just hidden in some part of the jungle we haven't looked at yet. Do you know for 100% certain that there aren't horse-ish remains in the undiscovered jungle? Yeah, I didn't think so just back off there, buddy. You know what? We're spending too much time on the horses. It's a long list, but hey, one down, so yay. Okay, moving on to cows. Oh, bison. Nailed it. I mean, it still doesn't solve the whole no evidence of large-scale animal domestication in the ancient Americas problem, since, by all accounts, the ancient American cultures that munched on bison would follow wild herds nomadically rather than pen them and breed them as domesticated animals in the way the use of the term cow or cattle implies in the Book of Mormon, but, potato, hippopotamus. Let's do a plant this time. Wheat. Wheat is like amaranth, which is a perennial plant that the Aztecs used as a food source, apparently. See, it even looks like wheat, more or less. So, bonus. This is fun. And you know what? I'm seeing a pattern here. In fact, I think we can polish off the rest of this list in one fell swoop. I actually wrote a little song for this, just a little ditty to help you resolve any other allegedly anachronistic plants or animals in the Book of Mormon. It goes a little something like this. Well, it's a plague of latter days to be beset from every way by slanderific Book of Mormon gripes. They see horses mentioned here or there and feel entitled to declare the text to be anachronistic tripe. But when those fiery darts descend, it is no laughing matter, friend, and for such times I wrote this little song. It's a method of supreme deflection, whipped up just for your protection, so see if you can try and sing along. First grab a hold of that pesky word, the one that science finds absurd. Twist it round and squint your eyes and start a-searching for the prize. Something you can point to as a semblance, even if it's just a slight resemblance. Just a shred of plausibility is all you need, and then you too can know the hippopotamus do-si-do. Now there are those that might dismiss and tell us that we've gone amiss. They may whine and moan and even cuss, saying we protect our intellects by taking those who wrote the text and throwing them right underneath the bus. But we're just doing what we can for the eternal life of man by giving faith an academic look. So next time you find yourself bowed beneath a heavy shelf, just take a page out of the Romans book. Snatch that critter by the neck before it drags you down to heck. Pick it up and swing it round and start searching up and down for the juicy taste of confirmation, for the warm embrace of validation. Something to help you get back up on your feet is all you need to bask inside the glow of the hippopotamus All right. I hope that helps you out. That's enough for now, I think. We'll pick it up from here in the next installment of Brother Jake Defends the Book of Mormon.